City of Stevens Point Board of Park Commissioners meeting, recorded April 2nd, 2025.
Call the April 2nd, 2025 Board of Park Commissioners meeting order. Roll, please.
Alder Broderick. Oh, we're muted, I'm sorry. Alder Broderick. Looks like she's online.
She's on.
Alder Boozy.
Here.
Freckman.
Here.
Disher.
Here.
Gladusky's excused. Alder Kiemer.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
O'Connor.
Here.
Shabilsky.
Here.
Sorensen.
Here.
And Wynn.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Item number 2, approval of the February 12th, 2025 meeting minutes. Motion?
I'd move approval.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Item number 3, award of downtown landscape maintenance contract to Plaski and Sons and not to exceed the amount of $19,400 per year for 2025 and 2026.
I can give some background on this. So there is a memo in the packet, but essentially what the downtown maintenance is back several years, long before my time, when the downtown square was renovated, as well as some of the planter beds and improvements happened in the downtown. At that time, my understanding was the city was going through some pretty big budget difficulties related to personnel, and some changes were happening on the forestry side and park side, as well as on the public works side. So essentially, the city set up the actual budget for downtown maintenance with the idea that as services may grow or other improvements would happen downtown, the city could adequately budget for that and know the actual expense. So we've had the same vendor for many years that recently, I believe, has sold their business, Scholfers, if you remember.
Yep.
So we do submit this out to 5 or 6 companies. It was 5 this year. We received 1 back. It's a little higher because the mulch around the Shopko site has been in the planter beds for quite a long time. That's in here. We will work with the contractor. The reason it's a not to exceed is if there's some things we can do in-house, we'll try to help with that as best we can. But ultimately, this is a 2-year agreement, and then we will budget accordingly if it ends up being slightly bigger than the amount we have budgeted. So we're recommending approval. Been a long-standing practice. I think we've had this contract or a contract going back almost a decade or longer. So with that, we're recommending approval to move that forward for 25 and 26.
All right, any discussion? Liz?
Does that include the median strips between the downtown and Piffner?
We do the plant, our forestry department does the planter, like the actual plants that we're planting, the flowers. That's
Okay.
actually done by us. I believe, I'm going to look to Paul just to verify, I think our boundary is the western edge of the square, right? Everything, once we cross into the medians, is done by our personnel directly, correct? Yeah, so this would essentially be the square area heading to the east until you get to, I'm going to get the intersection wrong, the Jewelers on the corner, where you can turn left on the one, what's the road?
Rogers?
Yeah, back where the main, where you're almost going to basically head into the downtown. We go everything that way to the east, or to the north, it'd be to the east and to the south. But everything when you head to the west from there is what's included in that contract.
The reason I was asking is because I know it looks like we put annuals in there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered if we couldn't be looking at switching to some like native plants or something like they did along the river.
Oh, sure, some pollinator plants, yeah.
So I think it would be less maintenance.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to pass that along. I can tell you, because of the change in positions, we do have a new person managing that. To Paul's credit, he's done a great job with it for many, many years, but when he was promoted from Arborist to Parks Superintendent, we're in the process of transitioning that to our new Arborist. So it'll be very similar this year, but then there'll be kind of a new person at the helm of it. So I'm happy to talk to Jacob and see maybe what some opportunities would exist for the future.
Because it probably would eliminate the need for cutting any grass in there too if we could put native plants in.
Sure.
Okay, any other discussion?
I guess a follow-up to Liz's, Dan, is this being bid out as a 2-year contract, or are these being bid out as individual years? Going back to your comment about the new person coming in and Liz's question, there isn't an option just to accept it for 25 and then wait?
Correct. So the solicitation we put out for quotation, or for quotes on this, was a 2-year arrangement the same way. So if we wanted to take it to a 1-year, we'd have to reissue the element for, basically, the contractors were aware they weren't bidding on 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other discussion? Being none, looking for a motion?
I'll move to accept this as proposed.
All right.
Second.
All right, no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, Ordinance Amendment to approve the changes to Chapter 10, Subsection 2 of 10.01 designated parks and Subsection 4 of Section 1005 park closing hours.
So this item is related to basically a new problem we didn't really anticipate, and that's related to our electric charger that's in Groholski Park. So not necessarily commonly known, but if you just park a vehicle in the park, our ordinance prohibits a person being physically in the park, but not the vehicle from being in the park, because they almost always go hand in hand and always have. So initially, when we ran into what we would call a vehicle that's been basically kind of left in the charger, has been kind of being used as a personal charger, we talked about, should we just ban all cars or vehicles in parks after hours? But then we started talking about the fact that we have softball games or baseball games or football games or other elements, and if those individuals were, say, out of town for a game that's out of town, sometimes vehicles will stay in the park in those situations, and trying to track how, say, the hockey team for UWSP or the adult softball team at the Zenoff, or let's say somebody maybe has a beer, one or too many at Zenoff or something, it gets very difficult. So we basically said, well, what's the actual issue that we're working with the police department on? And it's really isolated to that charging station. So what this ordinance updates is just stating that it would be physically, it would be illegal, it would be a local ordinance citation if you left the vehicle in the park. We'll have to sign it. It's not a very expensive ticket. I think the first one, don't quote me on this, but I think it was around $20 or something like that. It escalates if you would continue to violate it. So our current sign at the charging station says only when you're actively charging. We would just be signing that there's no vehicles in that park at this time. There's nothing in Groholski Park that would draw you there afterwards, right? It's just that we do have that free solar charger that allows people to connect. So in addition to that, there's a name in the park listing, and doing some research trying to find where this is, or if it was land we had bought that we had changed the name, all we could find is that there was some recreational activities that used to happen at the park across from the brewery, even though it was never owned by the city, and the field is named that same Korfman Field. So we were trying to dig through it. I actually ended up calling my predecessor and just saying, do you remember anything differently in any sort of easements or any sort of documentation? We can't find it. We no longer have parks or city activities at that field, so it's not a park. It shouldn't be listed that way. So ultimately, if something were to come forward that we missed, or we found out there was a park that once was called that, we can certainly correct it, but we're recommending we strike it because we do not have that park location. So those are the two updates. The first piece of this is a Public Works Department update on top of that. So the ordinance change that they wrote up or drafted up, Public Works will be looking at this as well, but the two items that are specific to us would be updating the park name, and then also disallowing or basically making an ordinance prohibiting parking overnight.
All right, thank you. Any discussion or comments? Yes.
Korfman Park is the park across from the brewery that Little League used to use, and I only know because I was at the Ball Diamonds. The city maintained that diamond so that Little League could use it. So city mowed it, city dragged it, chalked it, lined it for Little League to use.
Makes sense.
And now that the Point Brewery has expanded, done stuff, it's just not there.
Sure. All right, thanks.
So then our research was right, which is good.
Yeah, my kids played their t-ball across from the brewery.
All right, any other discussion regarding the ordinance amendment?
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Thank you. Cars that are parking in the Groholski lot now, or that have been, are they visible from the street?
They are.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So there's really been two vehicles that we're seeing mostly that have been parking there, and
Okay.
because of the opening or kind of the clearing or the logging that took place, they're very visible from the street.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve.
All right.
I second it.
All right, any other discussion? Being none, all those favors, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, Parks Division Report presented by Parks Superintendent Paul Ziemann.
Floor is yours, Paul.
Hello, everyone. I know some of the faces from my time with the Forestry Department, but certainly not everyone, so it's nice to put some faces to the names that I've heard. Tonight, I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the things that are going on in the parks. We got 2 major projects that are currently underway. But first, I want to do a quick recap of our winter sports season. As many of you are aware, our winter this year was abysmal. I was starting to doubt we would even have a winter sports season. But late January, we had some timely smaller snowstorms, and they're calling for a couple weeks of below normal temperatures. We decided, let's give it a go. So with some cooperation from the Public Works for hauling snow, for all our banks that we need, we were able to get something started. We actually got the winter sports up and running on February 8th, which is historically a late opening. Our typical goal every year is keep everything fully operational until February 14th. After that, with the sun angles and everything, things usually go downhill in a hurry. So attempting to open February 8th was a gamble, and we decided to give it a go. We ended up going all the way until February 23rd, so that encompassed 3 full weekends, 2 of which we were able to get a toboggan run going, the green toboggan run. It was a gamble, yes, but I think it really worked out because every time I went to the park on the weekends, it was literally packed. So I think everyone was just chomping at the bit for something to do, and we offered that to them, so I was very happy for that. One of the major problems we had was a staffing shortage. I usually hire the winter seasonal staff end of November, beginning of December, usually between 10 and 12 people, usually college students that want to work over winter break and make some money on the weekends. When we decided to give it a go, and I started making the calls saying we're a go, one after the other had already moved on. You know, December turned into January, turned into February, and they weren't working. So started to get some worries, thinking, boy, I'm going to be working a lot of hours. But luckily, there was a core group of 3 to 5 that stayed on, and they basically worked every public hour that we had open. So I was very appreciative of that. As far as specific numbers, we had 133 toboggan rentals, and we generated $819 in revenue, which no matter how many times I try and figure that out with a $6 and $12 rental, it doesn't work. So I don't know. Of course, another aspect of the winter sports are the ice rinks at Goerke. We were able to open the big rink, the open rink. That's our first priority. We opened that on December 13th. We had extended below normal temperatures, so we usually try and get at least one of the rinks going by Christmas. We would like to have snow because when the temperatures start to get warm and you got that dark ground underneath, it really the rinks take a hit. But we ended up doing it anyway. We started pouring water on bare ground. We were able to build a base, and like I said, we got that open on the 13th. The hockey rink was shortly thereafter, and then, of course, we moved on to the rink at Iverson. There were a couple times we did have to close for a couple days at a time when the temperatures got too warm and the ice gets soft, bubbles start coming up from the ground. So we simply had to wait for some colder temperatures, and then we shaved the ice and started building up the base again. The official close was March 4th, which, even though we started on bare ground, that was a longer than normal run. So it worked out. It really worked out. As far as some of the projects we got going on, there's a cooler being installed over at Zenoff Park in the concession stand. This project actually started in September of last fall. This project has had a lot of moving parts, a lot of hands in the pot, a lot of redesigns, but I do see the light at the end of the tunnel. The cooler is actually going to start being assembled next week and should be finished up and running, they tell me, by April 18th. We were able to source some used cooler panels locally here, so it saved us a substantial amount of money. The final product is actually a cooler freezer combo. I believe there's 3 freezers that are utilized for product up at Zenoff, 5 freezers utilized for product up at Zenoff. So this should really open up the concession stand and give a much better working space. The other project is the Buchholz lighting down at Buchholz Park, the ball diamond down there. The old poles were removed and new steel poles with LED lights were erected. The poles went up the second week of February, and now we are waiting for the boring to start to supply the power to those poles, and I just found out today that They are slated to begin April 14th and plan to be done sometime that next week. I'm hoping all this works out because this is kind of putting us in a bind. The park ball diamond was already supposed to have some games played, but because of the weather, they've all been canceled, but there's games next week. Right now, if someone were to play, there are no lights. So I'm hoping everything works out. Otherwise, I'm sure some game times will have to be adjusted because if they're starting at 5, with darkness and everything. So we're hoping it works out. As far as daily parks, we have a lot to do right now, and really we can't get at it. Lodge rentals are beginning this month. Bathrooms need to be fired up this month. A lot of the ball diamonds are beginning, besides Blue Colt. So we've been kind of jumping around, trying to do stuff that we don't normally do now, jump ahead so that when the crunch time comes, we're not swamped as bad as we are going to be. But we're going to go from 0 to 60 in a day, I think, but we got a great crew, so we'll manage. So that kind of wraps up my report. I wasn't sure how much time I was allotted.
Very good.
I'm going to add a few things.
Sure,
Okay,
yes.
so- I guess before if you open for questions, I just want to mention, because I don't think we ever formally recognized it here. So Paul was promoted just under a year ago, come up on a year here in May, to the Parks Superintendent position. But previous to that, he was our arborist for 24 years. So a couple things I'll just mention. So first off, obviously it was a huge loss to the Forestry Division when Paul transitioned over, but we were able to keep the institutional knowledge and his leadership. I will tell you firsthand, just seeing it from my 6 years here, huge positive change agent. So a lot of the pros you've probably seen, Parks has always been solid. I'm not knocking anything on the previous side, but a lot of the pros that our forestry unit really, what I would call, thrives in, Paul was able to pull over, and I think we've seen a huge change and adjustment, just about a fresh face over the leadership that we'd had for 24 years. So big kudos to Paul on that, and I think our Parks Division, I don't want to speak for Steve and his team, but I've heard numerous times from them just saying, hey, we've really appreciated kind of a new face on our side and the resources that have come with it. So kudos to Paul for that. And also on these projects, he's underselling them a little bit. The Bucco project is, lights that have been standing for, I think, 40 or 50 years. They're in poor shape. And a lot of the things there were put in without marking them. So you spend a lot of time there kind of trying to oversee that, making sure that we're installing it. Another thing about that project is our Tourism Commission has been a huge supporter of the Parks Division. That was funded by the American Legion, and it helped with our office, but they went and got pledges signed. The Tourism Commission pledged to that. That's a $340,000 upgrade that the city taxpayer put $50,000 into. The rest of it has been funded by private dollars of the Tourism Commission. And additionally, on the Zenoff project side, there's a lot of things impending, but been working through. Paul's done a really good job of kind of picking up projects that started before he took that role and carried them to fruition, certainly surrounded by his team that's helping him. So kudos to Paul on a great year, and hopefully many more years here in that leadership role as we go forward.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Discussion? All right, thank you very much. Item number 6, Director's Report.
A couple things here in the Director's Report. First and foremost, in case anyone did not see it, we held a public information meeting last week at the KB Willard Arena in the Skyward Room. Both sessions for Zenoff and for Goerke were recorded, so they are on the city website on the YouTube page. Several of you were able to make it, but that is basically available if anyone would like to read through it or watch it and see what questions are being answered. Another thing to remind everyone in our community, anyone that's listening or anyone that's going to see this video, we are collecting surveys until April 11th. On April 11th, the survey deadline will close. We'll start tabulating the resident and non-resident feedback that we've gotten. We have had a strong survey response thus far. We're up to about 320 residents on the Goerke side. We've had just around 200 non-residents. I still probably have about 40 surveys in my inbox that I have to catch up with here this week yet. On the Zenoff side, we're around 100 residents that have submitted and around 40 non-residents that have submitted. So there's been a lot more popularity or pure numbers on the Goerke side. And again, that'll be going and advertised through our office through that date. In addition to that, there's a number of meetings, basically stakeholder meetings that are taking place, especially following the February 12th meeting. We met with all of our community gym users. We have really 4 or 5 groups that use the community gym during the day for free from 7 to 3, or it's included as being open to the public when the Boys and Girls Club is not using it. They came in on March 13th. We've also had follow-up meetings with the Stevens Point School District, UWSP, the Stevens Point Catholic School System, and the Boys and Girls Club here in March. We had reached out and spoke with Noble Clinics. they're getting closer to the completion of their construction project, so they were interested in knowing kind of the process forward. So we sat down with Noble Clinics last week, and then I've had a couple different citizens come in both before and after the public input meeting that have had specific questions and offered some feedback. So I've collected that, and they sat down in the actual physical office. The most recent meetings that have taken place is the Historical Society has reached out, so we were able to sit down and talk through kind of their elements. They have also planned a meeting where they're going to talk through kind of Goerke Park in general, and that's scheduled for the first week of May. So there'll be another resource that's going to kind of be before the Park Commission meeting in May there, where there'll be some more information that's being held. So essentially at this point, we'll continue to collect that feedback. As a reminder, once we have the pure volume and numbers, if it can be processed in time, the intention is to bring that back to you folks in May, along with basically any comments and feedback you're probably likely hearing yourselves, and that'll lead to a public discussion that'll be obviously offered to the public to come and comment here as well. What staff will be looking for when we hit that May or June date will be just really the next direction. If you'd like to see some revisions, what the next version should look like so that we can kind of get that drawn as we move forward. So where that sits right now otherwise is just public outreach via our social media page and trying to really basically encourage survey completions. And then again, I know you'll probably be receiving some comment too. So if anyone does reach out, please direct them to fill a survey out or as also watch those videos, and then we will be packaging that information up and bringing it forward. Additionally, a couple other big items for the Forestry Department on the Director's Report is that we were awarded the 44th year consecutive for Tree City USA, which is a wonderful recognition, but even more importantly, or step up, it was our 20th year for the Growth Award. In order to get the Growth Award, you have to score points in key areas related to forestry practices, so they evaluated even more than just passing some of the things that the Tree City USA is needed for. And again, because of our, primarily the grant and the management plan that we just completed that was all adopted, we scored some extra points in that category because of that long-term planning, so we were awarded that Growth Award for the 20th year. Singing the praises of another staff member, Jacob Sutherland, just completed his successful probationary period. We will get him in front of this commission at some point just so you know who he is, but Jacob's our new arborist and been bringing a wealth of knowledge on his end, and loves to climb trees too, so he's done a lot of things that we hadn't done for a while, and again, fresh faces are always good. So it's been also really nice to see Todd's institutional knowledge and Todd's years of experience and kind of that interaction between the two of them as they're kind of working through what I would probably call kind of new school as well as maybe more tenured school as they're talking through things, which it's really great. So very cool. And also in the Forestry Division, we have Ken and Jonathan, and they've been really great to work with and kind of help Jacob get up to speed, as well as they're really great resources and do a lot of great for our Forestry Division as well. So the last thing I wanted to mention then on the Director's Report is the Plover River Crossing project. So as you recall, we haven't talked about that much. Where that is there is a lot of steps to meet the TAP grant, the transportation grant requirements, and we're in the key elements now where we're basically estimating up material costs and all of the what they call a 60% design. And as you remember, we have Rutler Corporation and AECOM as a sub-consultant underneath them that's working on that for us. We are on schedule to have the final approval by the DOT around July 1st. That's the goal. If that approval is given, which we anticipate to hit, then that will allow us to wait till we get into the fiscal budget for the federal government, which would allow us to bid that project in September, and we believe construction should be able to begin around before January 1st. There is some, because we're in some environmentally sensitive areas, there's some requirements in terms of fencing as well as some natural, basically wildlife that we have to work around. So there'll be some critical milestone dates in terms of maybe when some of the tree removals, if there are any, have to happen, or when, say, for example, the helical piles would be drilled into the wetland, things of that nature. And I'll be able to give you a more complete picture here as we get a little closer. Where we're at right now is, we know the trail is obviously going to be 12 feet wide. You're going to be able to drive a vehicle on it because of the transportation element of the grant. We know it'll be wood boardwalks, right, some of that stuff. So nothing that I would call as unordinary or unusual. But again, more complete picture will come forward, but everything is on schedule based on what we're doing. This was the earliest we could hit, right? So the way we were slotted in that grant program, we couldn't have moved any faster. We actually had to request it, and we were approved to get the July 1st completion date for the state DOT review, and then we can move into basically that federal fiscal cycle within the grant program. So we were a little worried, to be honest, given some of the freezing and funding about how that would look, but basically what we've been told so far is that there is no impact to the program we're in, and that we can continue to move forward. So that is a big question, as you recall. That grant is $1.8 $1.8 million. 80% of it is part of the funding from the grant side, 20% is the local match. So certainly that's a massive amount of money that's coming in that grant project. So we'll continue to monitor. We're hoping not to see anything that's unforeseen, but that's kind of where we sit right now. We have a project meeting basically every 3 weeks where we go through the latest information along with our grant coordinator with the DOT. Our next one is actually tomorrow, so I'll have a greater update tomorrow as we head into those last items. So over the summer, I'll get you more of an update. We hope to maybe get some more, if you care, like the spec, so you can see it, right, and make sure that you kind of know, but it's following the same things that you've already reviewed and approved thus far. With that, that is what I have for the director's report.
All right, any questions for?
So you'll actually be able to drive a car on that thing?
Yeah, so the intent, basically, to meet the grant requirements, we could. So you have to plow the trail. Because it's a commuter trail,
Okay.
the grant is not a recreational trail, even though it will serve that purpose.
So you got to be able to plow it?
We have to be able to plow it. Now, we will likely, I won't speak for the Parks Division, we'll go over it, but we will likely plow it with a UTV. That's our thought. But it has to be able to have a vehicle drive across it to meet the grant requirements. So
Got it.
I'll get into the weeds a little bit. It's probably going to be 20-foot spans of a boardwalk, right? So you have 20-foot sections. They'll probably be 6x material so that they're heavier build, so it can hand that kind of weight. And then you'll have helical piles that are basically, they get screwed in the ground on both ends of them that'll hold the boardwalk up out of the wetland. And the helical piles meet some of the shading requirements for wetland areas. If you get, when you start getting this wide, you start getting with that much lumber, there's actually a shade calculation to make sure that you're not impacting the wetland too much. So some of the heights play a role, and people with the engineering degrees that I don't have certainly help us with that part of it. But right now we believe that the trail will probably be approximately 2.5 to 3 feet off the ground. And then as you ramp to the actual bridge on the Plover River, it'll likely raise to around 6 feet. You'll span that river, so you have a little more overhead clearance if you're going to kayak and things of that nature. And then you'll land on the Rogers Park side back closer to the existing Green Circle Trail. So, but before we really say officially, right, it's going to be 3.5 feet or 3 feet, the DNR, or the DOT, I'm sorry, and the DNR, but primarily the DOT has to take this 60% submittal, that'll become an 80% submittal, and then they'll finally be able to say that's all set. And then we can, really come and say it officially, because you'd hate to say, we think it's 3.5, and it comes back at, say, 5 or something, too. The idea is not to be floating, obviously. The closer we can be to the ground, the better is the whole. So.
Dan, as a follow-up to that, in terms of the non-boardwalk trail, is that going to be granted, or is that going to have to be paved based on the conditions of the grant?
Paved. So when you come off of Ben's Lane, it has to be an asphalt trail. So essentially on Ben's Lane, you'll be asphalt all the way down that incline or decline. Then you'll come into the flat space, which we're kind of calling a prairie area, right? The city owns that, basically an acre back there. That'll have no railings because it's flat ground asphalt till you hit the boardwalk. Boardwalk, when it's on the ground, won't have railings, but very shortly thereafter, it'll be railinged because you're going to be basically the height that it's at. You have to have no more than a 6-inch gap between the railings. So you'll have a railing that'll be 40. Testing my memory here. It's 42 inches. It could have been between 42 and 54. We went 42 with the idea that bicycle handles will be over the top of it, and it'll be more waist height for the average adult, and children will be more around their shoulder height, and then you won't have any basically openings where somebody could get underneath it. The other good news about it is the height that it is, even if somebody did, you're not dropping off a bunch of feet, so that's kind of how it's set up. There'll be a railing then that goes all the way till you get across the bridge, and the last stretch when you get on the existing Green Circle will not have railings, but basically getting to that will. So.
All right, thanks. Any other comments or questions?
Did you, I don't know if you've thought about how to, with the survey information, how you might distill, because it sounds like you have a lot of information to potentially distill into. Have you thought about how you might go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially how the surveys are coming in, right, is you have the support section, you have the non-support section. So we'll talk about the support section. Each element on the proposed draft of it, right, I'll be able to tell you if we have, say, 400 surveys that came in, 200 people selected that the aquatic center relocation is something they support. 150 selected they didn't, and 50 didn't select either. Additionally, you're getting categorical data in the comments, so you'll get, the Park Commission will get all of the actual raw submittals in a spreadsheet if you care to read them all. We, in my office, will process and be able to tell you we see 182 mentions of the warming house. We see 52 mentions of the Price Street homes, and you'll be able to see it in case you don't have the time, right, because some of you might not, to read every one of them. So as people submit the survey comes in its totality. We save it as Dan Kramer, Survey 200 resident, and that gets cataloged in case someone would care to see everyone, they can, right? It's public record. What's moved into the spreadsheet is a value of, okay, they selected the pool, that's a value 1, because when we tally it, if you didn't select it, no value goes in. If you selected it, you get a value 1 to be able to tell you 200 of the 500 selected that part. That's one element of feedback, certainly, right? You're going to probably hear from people as well in terms of comments, and you're going to have your personal observations. So, but it'll be able to basically put on a slide when we get into those park commission discussions. I'll be saying to you as park commissioners, hey, we're looking at the drop-off around PJs. I need direction. Would you like that to be in the next version? Here's the resident support, non-support. Here's the non-resident support, non-support. Staff is asking for clarification. Would you like it to be on the next version? And we'll go down the line, right? I'll say the same thing when we go to the dome. Dome support, non-support. Would you like this in the next version? Based on whatever the commission will vote, then that next rendering can be produced. So I anticipate when we get to that meeting, most likely I'll have to work with the chair, but I'm thinking there's probably going to be 8 or 9 action items. And the action item is going to be, please draw it again, or keep it or don't keep it. And then obviously they'll need to lead to a future conversation at a park commission for adoption. The action item is really just going to be specific to move the aquatic center, yes, right? Next drawing, keep the Parker building, or look at this, and we'll be asking, as long as the chair is okay with it, for individual feedback on each item, so the minutes reflect what this second version or next version of the concepts look like. Zenoff might be slightly different. I can tell you, just me looking at the surveys, there's not been as much ask for changes in Zenoff, so that one might end up being a little bit higher level, but Goerke, I anticipate, as long as the chair is okay with it, that you'll have separate items on each component.
Okay.
So.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you very much. With that, item number 7, adjournment.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.